Renee.
Yes.
7.
Hello. Hello, I'm Steve. I'm Larry Volland. And my wife, Barbara. We're from the Summit Waller area. Oh, okay. But, Mayor Councilman was a former student of mine at California. I do. Okay. And Renee Gillen was our neighbor for 10 years. Oh, up in Summit Waller before she moved into. Yeah, well, welcome. 3 years, actually. It was me. So you have entire city basin, basin by basin. You can look at a particular basin. Existing lines are proposed exception. It's pretty cool map. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
I'm waiting for your information. I'm sure you're gonna have to roll.
Good evening. This meeting will come to order. This is the Puyallup City Council study session. This is not a normal council meeting where we actually delve in and make votes, but instead it is actually what the title says. It's a study session where we investigate topics that we may have action in the future, but it's very important that we have public give their opinion, but also staff, and then we question staff after they've studied a particular issue and they'll present those facts to us. So with that, I'd like everyone to stand, please, for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. With that, Dan, would you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Councilmember Whitting,
Present.
Councilmember Dorr,
Present.
Councilmember Adler,
Councilmember Adler is excused absence.
yes, sir. Councilmember Johnson,
Present.
Deputy Mayor King,
Present.
Councilmember Gilliam,
Present.
Mayor Castema.
Present. With that, I'd like to have an approval, motion to approve the agenda, please.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Approved and seconded. Those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, let's move on to what we're here today about, and that is the agenda items where we are, in fact, we've received many inquiries, at least on one of these items, and it's important that we vet the issue, and that item is 1A, the regulation of consumer fireworks. And we have City Manager Steve Kirkley will give us a presentation, and I would ask all members to start writing your questions down. Every conceivable question that you have. I know Steve has studied this issue extensively. I say that slight humorously, but we do have our police chief here, and we also have the fire. Am I correct? Yes. Who can assist us. It's important that we learn what other communities are doing, because this is an issue that continually comes up around the 4th of July as to whether or not we are handling this correctly or not. So with that, Steve, please proceed.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Castema, Steve Kirkley, City Manager, and I wanted to do a presentation to just to kind of kick off your discussion tonight. I by no means am an expert in fireworks, and I think ultimately this is a policy decision that council has to make, and so we wanted to just start with providing some context for your discussion this evening. So just as background,
staff did some history, some legislative history in terms of how often the council has discussed this issue and looked back over 20 years ago. And so city council has discussed this issue in different forms over several times over the past 20 years. And to this point, fireworks still remain an illegal. You can shoot off fireworks on 4th of July. The only change that was made was in June of 2016, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. That was the only change to the fireworks law that has been made. But I just want to show you that this is not something that is new to the council. Obviously, some of you were here when these discussions occurred, and many of you were not. As background, consumer fireworks, which is a term that's regulated by state law. So just to kind of give you the framework, there's an extensive chapter in RCW, the state law 70.77, that regulates the sale and use of fireworks. It's very extensive. We also then have a code, Puyallup Municipal Code, chapter 1620, that also regulates fireworks. And so the term consumer fireworks is actually defined in state law, but in essence, it means the fireworks that are legal to be shot off here within the city limits. As you are probably aware, fireworks can be discharged here one day out of the year. That's July 4th from 9 a.m. to 11 p.m. That is the only time that they are allowed to be shot off. Consumer fireworks are allowed to be shot off. There are provisions for fireworks shows, for instance, like the fair does, and other community-based events that are not considered consumer fireworks. And that is regulated by state law, by our code, and by Central Pierce Fire and Rescue. And I'm sorry, I forgot to introduce Assistant Chief Burdan with Central Pierce Fire and Rescue. He is the Assistant Chief for Prevention and Education for the district. And so thank you for being here this evening, Assistant Chief. And then, of course, Chief Scott Engel. So the other component of the law that I just wanted to let you be aware of is fireworks stands are permitted within city limits from June 28th to July 4th. So you've probably seen them here on Meridian. Sometimes there's some down by the fire hall down there by Grayland Park. Those tents are permitted by the fire department. They are the primary entity that does the inspection on those fireworks stands. That is a set time period, June 28th to July 4th. And then we just list some other components of the law regulating who can buy them and different components of how the stands have to be operated. Now, I'd mentioned that there was one change that council did adopt in 2016. That has to do with the weather-related emergencies in essence. And so back in 2015 and 16, council was very concerned about the dry weather that was occurring and the threat from fireworks that could cause fires. And so there was quite a bit of discussion. And in 2016, City Council did amend the code and provided an emergency provision in there that allows for ultimately you, the City Council, to approve a temporary ban on fireworks. The process that was set out was the city manager, in consultation with the police chief and the fire chief, brings a recommendation to you all for a temporary ban. That recommendation has to be based on the Department of Natural Resources, which is a state agency, and their fire threat assessment, which they have each year. And if they deem that our area, Pierce County, has a very high or extreme risk of fire, then we as staff can bring to you a recommendation to temporarily ban fireworks. So that's the only change that has occurred over the past decade, a couple decades relative to fireworks. This, just for your education purposes, is something that the state of Washington, State Patrol, State Fire Marshal puts together kind of as an education piece. And these are consumer fireworks. So this is what is legal. It's something that we use in our outreach materials. I certainly know the fire district uses them. I'm not going to go through all of those. Some of this probably looks familiar to you. Then this is the list of items that are illegal, so that at least illegal within the city limits. So the top portion there, you can see those firecrackers, bottle rockets can be sold on Native American reservations and discharged on the reservations. It can't be discharged in city or state property. And the bottom portion are items that are just illegal, period, everywhere in the state. So the city and the fire district certainly do a fair amount of outreach each year. This last year, we did a significant amount. And when I say we, primarily the police department, the fire district, and our public information officer put together a really nice video that worked with Pierce County TV, PCTV, and had a video on firework safety and education. That was distributed on our social media channels, on the website. They also put together an article in the e-newsletter on our website, and even some officers went out and handed out flyers to the community, just educating on what the law is and offering some tips on safely discharging fireworks. So this is something that we would continue to do it again this year. Usually started in late May, early June, before the fireworks stands are up, so people know before they go and purchase fireworks. Fireworks emphasis, we did some research. Chief Engel done some research, and I'll show you in a few minutes here of how other cities regulate fireworks. But one of the things that Puyallup is very different than most cities in Pierce County is our officers are actually dispatched to firework complaints. Many cities in this county do online reporting. So what that means is if somebody in a city that does online reporting has a firework complaint, they go online, they put in a report, and that may or may not be responded to. Many cities, they don't even dispatch. So meaning you're not going to call 911 and a dispatcher is going to get on there and go, okay, we'll send an officer out. That's not what happens. They actually submit a report online, and then that just goes into the system. And there is not a response. An officer is not dispatched out to the call. In the city, our practice is you call 911, a dispatcher gets on the line, what's your issue? And then that dispatcher dispatches out a police officer. Now, of course, if there's some other huge emergency, they can't respond to that call, then they don't, but they are dispatched to it. And the police department does respond to those calls. That is not the norm in Pierce County. I think there were a total of 4 cities that do that. The vast majority of them do not. They do the online reporting. Another component of this is just for your education purposes. And this kind of, goes back to my wearing my prosecutor hat, which I did several years ago. But there's something called the misdemeanor presence rule or officer presence rule with fireworks. And it's really important to understand this. If an officer wants to arrest someone for a fireworks violation, which by the way, in our code is a misdemeanor. So that's 90 days in jail and $1,000 fine. That is right now in our code. That is the way that is the penalty. For an officer to make an arrest on that, they have to do really kind of a 2-part thing. First of all, they have to know that it's an illegal firework. So that's the first thing. And that can be challenging. They also then have to see the person actually shooting the firework off. That's why it's called the misdemeanor presence rule. So it can't be Scott Engel says Steve Kirkley was firing off a firework, and then they can rely on his witness statement. They actually have to see it. That can be very challenging by the time a police officer arrives. Or another scenario is often fireworks are not shot off from a public area. So they may be shot off from the backyard or somewhere where an officer does not have access to. So then you have to get into the analysis of, well, can I go back there? Do I need a warrant? So I just say that because it's not as easy as one may think in terms of enforcing it. Another component on this that I think is important is that when officers do encounter illegal fireworks and it's apparent to them that is an illegal firework, they will confiscate them. And so Chief Engel and I were talking this morning about it. They confiscate them and then turn most of those illegal fireworks over to Central Pierce. So this is our kind of raw data. We've not done, a deep dive into other, jurisdictions. We certainly can, if council wants us to do a deeper dive and calls for service beyond Puyallup, that would take a little bit more work. But we wanted to at least give you an idea of calls for service here within the city. So you can see, we went back to 2019, and the first column or the second column from your left is the average daily calls for service. So this is an average across the entire year. We just took amount of calls, divided them by 365, just to kind of give a somewhat of a frame of reference. And then that third column there is how many calls for service we received on the 4th of July overall. And then of that amount, how many were fireworks related. So you can definitely see that we receive calls on the 4th of July relating to fireworks. Last year, there were about 18. I'll point out that at least insofar as last year, it is a very busy calls for service day. And last year, there were only about 18 that were related to 4th of July. The other amount, which was quite a bit, what is that, almost 75 more than our average, were related to things, disorderly conduct, parties, you name it, things that occur when people are celebrating. And then the day-to-day events that our police officers respond to. In terms of other jurisdictions and their regulations, East Pierce County, as a rule, all the cities out in East Pierce County allow fireworks to be shot off on 4th of July, including an incorporated Pierce County. So we are surrounded by entities that allow for fireworks to be shot off. Lakewood and University Place, which is, I guess, in central Pierce County, they also allow for fireworks to be discharged. Most all of these, except for Fife and Eatonville, limit it to July 4th. There are some cities, as you can see here, mainly in the west side of the county, that do prohibit fireworks, an outright ban. And then just lastly, some additional information. As you all know, the Chamber of Commerce has a community fireworks event. It's the Red, White, and Kaboom on July 3rd and 4th, Pioneer Park. That is funded through city LTAC, motel tax funds. And then in terms of fireworks stands in the city limits, last year we had 7 stands that sold fireworks. Of those 7, 2 were churches based out of Seattle. 1 was a cheer group, I think that was selling as a fundraiser for their cheer team. And then the remaining 4 were private entities selling fireworks. So that's the extent of my presentation to start off your discussion. We will be here to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions?
Yes.
Councilmember Deputy Mayor King.
Sorry, I broke your button, Councilmember Dorr. You are not allowed to ask questions tonight.
That's okay.
I'm just kidding. Question regarding fines. You mentioned that fines up to $1,000 or $1,000 fine. Is that the maximum one could be fined, or could we change that?
Right now, that is the maximum because it's a misdemeanor. And so as long as it's a misdemeanor, the penalty for a misdemeanor is set by state law.
Got it. If fireworks were shot off illegally on a piece of property and it was not or let me just try to rephrase this. If it wasn't an actual, what am I trying to say? The person that shot the fireworks was not seen or could not be seen doing it, but they knew it came from a particular property. Could that property owner be fined?
I'm looking at the chief and the city attorney. I'm going to say no, unless the city attorney disagrees with me on that.
What if there was video surveillance of that property and property owner of that person turned over to the police department? Could they be fined at that point?
I don't believe so, because unless, again, that goes back to the misdemeanor presence rule. Joe, if I'm going astray here, please chime in. Why don't I have the city attorney?
You're not astray, but
they're in the criminal arena. But there might be a way to craft a civil infraction type approach. I'm just, you got my brain spinning by asking the question. So I'm not gonna go any further out on the limb than that. But if you're truly interested in some sort of penalty type, preventative scheme of some sort, we might be able to craft some sort of infraction type approach that would allow, police officers still have to see it happen to issue an infraction, but prosecutors don't. So there might be something we could come back with, but it would take some research and it would take some thought.
That's all I have.
Just for clarification, in other words, what you're saying, Attorney Beck, is that it would be like a parking ticket. You would just, it'd be a civil infraction. So if you see someone do it, you write a ticket, you hand it to the person, and then they'd be liable to pay that fine, but it would not be a criminal offense.
Right. We'd have to come up with we would have to write a city specific code and and then it would go from there. Again, I don't have this fully thought out, so please, but that would be the avenue that I would pursue if council wanted something more than what, the criminal violation that's already in state law. We would want to explore a city specific, a Puyallup specific code that was an infraction, a civil violation versus a criminal violation.
And just to, put a point on that with what Joe was saying, an officer still would have to observe that. It's just the level of penalty is different, right? So in a misdemeanor, they can go to jail. In an infraction, an officer still has to see that because they are signing under penalty of perjury that they believe there is sufficient cause, not probable cause in an infraction, but sufficient cause, reasonable cause to issue that. So you still would need, an officer to observe that. The penalty would be different, and they're not subject to jail. And the fine would be set by, as Joe said, by you all.
And video surveillance would not matter.
I don't think video surveillance would be acceptable. As you know, video surveillance is kind of frowned on as a method of straight law enforcement. We have red light photo enforcement with a lot of rules on how that can be applied. So I don't think video surveillance is an answer to that. If we got into the code compliance arena with a civil infraction, there might be some solutions that way, but it would take some research and some looking into it before. I don't want to say anything further than what the city manager has already advised you of.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Dorr.
Thank you. So, city attorney, if if legal fireworks, legal determined by the state of Washington, so the safe and sane or whatever they call those, if we have a ban, are we able to confiscate legal fireworks?
Yeah, if they were banned in the city, we would be able to confiscate them. Yeah.
Okay. And then, Chief, Kevin, you're next. So do you increase staffing on the 4th of July?
When we can and when Central Pierce can, we do increase staffing in 2 areas. Number one, when Central Pierce has deputy fire marshals available to be the fireworks response team, we pair an officer with those deputy fire marshals specifically to be able to respond to fireworks calls. We found that we're much more effective when we're able to partner with them. They are way ahead of us in understanding what's legal and not legal sometimes when officers are left to that graph to figure out whether they're legal or not. And then the second area that we usually staff up on is for DUI enforcement.
So do you have, if there was a ban, and I can't find the numbers, but I don't know, do you have the numbers from South Sound on the online reports?
No.
How many? Okay, so I can get it if we bring this back, but there are those agencies that do the online reporting, and I know Tacoma is a large one. and they have a large number of online reports and they don't respond. If we were to ban these fireworks, I will tell you, my concern is that we are setting up the police department for failure because do you have more staff to be able to mandate in to enforce this ban?
That's an excellent question. So I should have premised your prior question with staffing for DUI enforcement and fireworks control. That is not a mandatory force someone in to do that. It has traditionally been a voluntary sign up to be able to do that. We have not mandated people in to do that. And frankly, Councilmember Dre, I need to think through that. I would be hesitant to mandate folks in for that level of enforcement. Our resources have to be prioritized for the things that are extremely important. And on the 4th of July, as the city manager pointed out, we deal with parties, DUIs, intoxicated people who get into fights and many of those issues. And so I think one really has to step back and ask if we're going to order in police officers for the 4th of July, what are we using those resources for? And that would be first and foremost in my mind.
So so you have 18 calls last year. Out of the calls that you actually, I shouldn't say, actually, I didn't mean that to sound like a demeaning. But out of the calls that you are able to respond to, or that you do respond to, do you see anybody when you arrive, are they just start charging fireworks, and what's going on there?
Not usually.
Okay.
The calls that we get historically have been there's someone doing what they believe to be illegal fireworks in the neighborhood, or they're on property that doesn't belong to them, or the fireworks have already gone off. And so by the time we get there, it's usually the team that contacts the people that are using fireworks. Our first step is, are they legal fireworks, right? If they're legal fireworks, educating them on safe practices, as well as the ordinance that you have to be done by 11 o'clock. If they are illegal fireworks, we confiscate those fireworks. And we've been doing that regularly on 4th of July ever since I've been here. But our officers do respond to every call when the resources become available to do that. It may be that sometimes we have 2 or 3 fireworks calls pending, waiting for available resources or waiting for the fireworks team to be able to respond to that. So you have to understand that there's sometimes a natural delay just from the call being made to getting dispatched and resources being able to go out there. But we always attempt to make contact with people where we can. As a city manager made comment to, if people are lighting them off in the backyard and they know we're standing at the front yard and ringing the doorbell, they don't have to come to the door, and some people don't. And so then we try to handle it other ways, but we always try to make contact and start from that process of, is this a legal firework or is it not?
Okay, so if we were to ban this, does it change the way in which you respond? I mean, the priority calls versus the fireworks calls. So these are going to be the low level response calls?
It will not change our response protocol. All calls that come into 911, as you know, are prioritized. And 1, 2, 3, 4. Priority 1 calls are somebody's life is in grave danger, or somebody's getting broken into, or something that has a life safety component to. Priority 2s are, somebody's right on that edge of maybe having something happen to them or something happen to their property. Priority 3s are, it's usually happened and there's nothing happening at the moment. And a fireworks call would fall into priority 4, where, hey, we need to get to these as soon as we can. But these other things that could have a DV, motor vehicle collision, DUI driver, burglary, vehicle prowl, I could go on for a long time. We have to send our resources that we have to those things first.
Okay, and so we have an 11 o'clock cutoff now. Do you have any experience with being able to enforce that?
We certainly have gone to fireworks calls after 11 o'clock, and it's usually from an educational component to say, that's it, you're done. And we're confiscating fireworks because it's past 11 o'clock. They're not legal at that point. Many times, those folks who are shooting off fireworks late into the morning, there's usually an alcohol component to that our officers encounter. So we're looking to hopefully work with people who there is someone sober at the location or the party or where it's occurring to be able to get that to stop. And again, if we can make contact with them, our officers will confiscate the fireworks if it's after 11 o'clock, because again, code says they can only go to 11. So after 11, nothing's legal.
Okay, and so I think that the city attorney's already answered this question, but I can tell you in my neighborhood, I don't participate, but there's a cul-de-sac behind me, and it is a huge neighborhood thing. And so if you came up on that, who are you talking to? Or who you have to still observe, or, but like, if you're gonna confiscate the fireworks, who, I don't know, who, okay, those are my fireworks. I paid for these fireworks. You paid for those. Do you, what does that, how do you do that?
So under the current scenario where fireworks are legal until 11 o'clock, if we were to go to that neighborhood who's having a neighborhood party and they're shooting them off, if they're within the time period that's legal and there's nothing illegal there, then it's just simply an educational contact. If it's after 11 o'clock and they're all still shooting off those fireworks, we're going to take all of them because no fireworks are legal after 11 o'clock by our city code. If there are illegal fireworks amongst the usually big groupings of fireworks there, we would take the illegal fireworks and educate them on what's legal and illegal and work from there.
Okay. Doesn't mean you're done, but I'm gonna talk to Assistant Chief Berdan.
Very good.
Welcome to council.
Excuse me, we have our attorney back. Joe, would you like to intervene here?
Sorry.
Councilmember Dorr, I'm gonna let him
Yeah, that's
clarify
fine.
just because it might be relevant. Go ahead.
So when we were talking about infractions and the enforceability of infractions, if we were to draft a local code that was a civil infraction, I had in the back of my mind that the rules had changed for infractions recently. So I just want to clarify what the state is for being able to enforce fractions. The current court rules issued by the state Supreme Court say that for an infraction, you simply have to have probable cause. The issuer, whoever issues that infraction, has to have probable cause to believe that the person has committed an infraction, and they can be issued by a citing officer. And specifically, they added, and this is a more recent addition to the code, that a notice of infraction can be issued by a police officer, and it need not have been committed in the officer's presence, except as if a particular statute says it must have been committed in the officer's presence. So if we drafted our own infraction, whatever that might look like, we could draft it in such a way that it does not have to be committed in the officer's presence. The officer just has to have probable cause to believe that the infraction occurred. It can also be issued by the prosecuting authority based on probable cause. So there is a little more flexibility with infractions, and I just wanted to clarify that. I'm sorry for butting in.
No, that's fine. I appreciate, and that might prove relevant with future questions. Councilmember Dorr, continue, please.
Thank you. So Kevin, currently, can you tell me how, I don't know this, I know that you partner with the police department, but I don't know what that looks like. And is that only in the city limits that the DFMs are doing that?
It is, yep, the support that we provide the police department is within the city limits only. Typically, one of our deputy fire marshals will jump into the rig with a police officer that is receiving those calls and provide support, educational support, as well as identification support, I suppose you could say, for illegal fireworks.
So is it who confiscates? Is it the police department or the fire department?
That is done by the police department, and then they will, they hand them over to us to be stored, and then we hand those over to the agency that actually destroys them.
Okay. And so if there is a ban, does your response or are you able to do anything? What do you do if we were completely ban it?
We have no enforcement capabilities as a part of the fire department, and so we would remain in a support role. We do have deputy fire marshals that are available now, kind of moving forward for the 4th of July, that we will be providing as a resource to the police department. But with no enforcement capabilities, we are completely in a support role.
Okay. And I know that I remember seeing the numbers, the assistant chief I had to think about that. I was going to say Ron, provided, but it seemed to me last year that the calls for fireworks related things or responses in the city of Puyallup were minimal. Do you know that number?
They were minimal. I think I I just looked at them on a precursor, kind of a superficial level. I think over the last 5 years, we've had, I say superficial, we had 217 over the last 5 years. So we're averaging about 40 per year. Generally, but that is throughout the county. That isn't just here within the city.
That's your whole
And
district.
that is the entire district. So we didn't break it down by area, by the boundary of the city. And so I don't know what the exact number is within the city of Puyallup, but I believe it was very minimal.
Do we have? I don't know, because I know you can't really take a position. You're in a support role. I'm trying to understand the impacts to the department from fireworks. Do you have any idea?
So I
Fires
consulted with Chief Morrow today, knowing that he wouldn't be able to attend today. And we're in a position where we'll remain neutral. There are other fire and life safety risks that far exceed fireworks in terms of the risk posed to the community. We do educational, we do support for the confiscation by the police department. But in terms of the prevention and education portion that we administer to the community that we serve, fireworks are pretty low level in terms of identified risk.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
And then Chief, I just have one last question based on what the city attorney said. So I'm gonna go back to my neighborhood, whatever, neighborhood Sunnyvale, neighborhood party. Who are you gonna issue the citation to if you don't have to witness it?
We're going to issue the citation to the person that we believe and or know or have probable cause to know that they set the firework off. So that's facts and circumstances that lead the officer to believe that there's 51% likelihood that that person set off the actual firework.
So in my neighborhood, the cul-de-sac, there are tons of people there. So what would you do?
Unless somebody's going to point that person out and we weren't there when it happened, we are left to people who were there to cooperate us. Maybe there's a witness to it or something like that. It also may be a situation where the officer simply takes a report, forwards it on the prosecutors to review for charging if we can't determine that. But again, the point can't be lost that we need to identify who actually was setting off the firework in any of the scenarios. We need to be able to identify that person to be able to take enforcement action. That causes the officer on the criminal realm. We have to get to a certain point to be able to arrest that person, or on the infraction status, we have to reach the standard of probable cause, which means the officer has to have 51% assurance that they believe subject X, Y, or Z was the one who actually did that. How we get there is part of the investigation. And some people may want to talk to us and some people may not.
So I lied. I have one more question. And then I'll give the floor. So when you have fireworks calls pending and you're able to get to them when the time allows, what is the response when they've been delayed? I mean, how are the citizens receiving a late, what is I don't know. Again, my concern here is the enforceability. And if we're gonna pass something that cannot be enforced, I don't want to set the police department up for failure. I mean, that's really what it is. It's going to have public perception is that you are not, we've instituted something that you can't manage. Do you have any, I don't know what, and maybe that's not a non-issue. Do you have any feedback on what you're hearing when they are able to get to them?
So when we get to those calls and we provide, can make contact, first of all, because it does depend on how long it has taken us to get there based on the resources that we have available to respond to those calls. Usually when we educate folks, they understand that. Illegal fireworks, no one is happy when we confiscate their fireworks. That goes pretty much without saying, but they're very appreciative that our approach with them is confiscation over enforcement. For
So
the citizens that call in, we do try to provide some education of what we were able to do if the officers have time to do that.
So my question was the people that are calling, are you getting repeat calls? Is there a level of frustration? Are they okay with?
We do get repeat calls. We do get repeat calls. One of the challenges, for example, in the slide that the city manager showed is we will get a call that a large boom occurred in my neighborhood. And people immediately assume that a large boom is an illegal firework. that it's an M80 or an M100 or things that most of us identified when we were kids. Well, I can tell you that today that legal fireworks, a mortar that goes up in a tube in the air, is a legal firework. And many of those have tremendous boom. It's called a report. And so we get there, they have not set off an M80 or an M100 or any of those things. They had a legal firework that they lit off that's completely legal, and it's very loud, but it is absolutely 100% legal to be able to light those things off. And so again, there's a lot to this in terms of education of people's perception and then what reality might be.
Okay, thank you, Chief.
Okay, City Manager Kirkley, if you could please come back up, and I'd like to see that slide of all the cities that do have this ban. And, you know, as a general rule, I like to see the experience that other communities have. Now, obviously, a lot of people have banned them out there. I saw Gig Harbor on the list. If we could go into that, I want to know what their experiences are. I see DuPont, Gig Harbor, Federal Way, Stillicum. I mean, Federal Way, very, very large city. You know, maybe the other ones not so much. City of Tacoma, however, geez, that's one of the largest cities in the state of Washington. I'd like to know what their experiences are, because the fact of the matter, what I believe, or I at least perceive, is that as other cities decide to not have fireworks and ban them, Puyallup, you know, at least in my neighborhood, you know, you'll have very large groups that will assemble, many of which who appear to be from outside the community, who come to communities because we do allow them. And the next thing you know, the intensity of our fireworks increase because other people have in fact banned them. So it's very important that I understand how these other cities implement this, how they enforce it, and whether it makes a difference at all. So what can you do to enlighten me on all those issues?
So we certainly can reach out to those cities and find out their experience on it. You know, Tacoma obviously has been doing it for quite some time, and you know, we can reach out to them and find out. I know that with Federal Way, you know, we were able to look at a PowerPoint that the deputy police chief did in Federal Way, and they still, even with their ban, still get quite a few calls for service each year for fireworks. DuPont and Gig Harbor were new. DuPont just did it this year, so their ban actually won't take effect till 2025. And Gig Harbor just recently did it too. So I'm not sure, we won't be able to get a whole lot of just because they're new, but we can certainly reach out to Tacoma and Crest and.
Well, let me ask you,
these
has
others.
any city that banned fireworks reversed their decision that you know of?
I've never looked at that, so I'd have to say I don't know.
Well, I would be very interested in that because it may well be, and I'd like to know some feedback from the public that is there, because clearly they banned them, and I have never heard this be an election issue, so to speak. And so they continue with the ban. So there must be, my point is that it must be enforceable to some extent, unless you tell me that it makes no difference whatsoever. And then also it must have a degree of popularity, again, except if you see the assumption that nothing's happening as far as the impact. So I would say from the evidence that I'm seeing, the public's response is generally favorable if I'm not seeing any reversals. And then I would like to also see whether it's impacted their number of calls, et cetera, because I can tell you that in my neighborhood, that we always have an altercation of some kind that is really way out of bounds, that neighbors complain, they get in fights with each other, oftentimes from people outside of the community. And then maybe the following year, that doesn't exist there, but it just happens to occur a block over, and we go through these cycles. It is not a pretty sight. So I would like to know what the experience, and I thought that's what we were going to have this evening, is to see what the experiences were with other cities and to see whether policy like this has an impact, because it's always important for us to learn from other people's experiences. So Anyway, I was hoping that that's what we would be hearing this evening. So do we have any other questions on the part of any individuals? Okay, hearing none.
Okay.
We're now going to go on to the next issue on our agenda. Let's move on to 1B, which is discussion of the city's sewer service area pertaining to the city of Edgewood. And we'll have our city engineer Hans Hunker give a presentation. Oh, actually, please go ahead. You're not Hans.
Thank you. Ken Davies, Public Works Director. Good evening, Mayor Castema and council. Tonight, we're going to be talking to you about the Edgewood sewer service consideration. This is sewer service in the southern portion of Edgewood. We're looking at we looked at the projected growth for Edgewood and the flows that we would receive from Edgewood. And we also looked at the projected growth for, the city of Puyallup when we were evaluating this and how their flows would impact our capacity. So tonight we're going to give you a high-level presentation, look at our current capacity and the ability to serve this area of Edgewood. One of the important things that I want to point out is this area used to be within the city of Puyallup's service area up till 2007, 2008. Puyallup was moving forward with improvements to the sewer for the, sewering this area. And this included lift stations, improvements, sewer mains, and upgrades to the treatment plant. One of the items back in 2007 or the early 2000s was out at Port 167, for example. We upgraded a lift station that was out there to accept flows from Edgewood. And so at this point, the flows there are really minimal. In addition to that, we also, when we were looking at the recent North Levy Road lift station upgrades, we anticipated the flows that would be coming into that lift station out to 2040, basically. And so when we are looking at that, historically, the flows that go into that lift station are from basin number 6 or Puyallup basin number 6. But we also looked at what Edgewood flows would do to that lift station, as well as rerouting from basin 33 over to that lift station. And so we upgraded, when we did the upgrade, we included those flows in that upgrade. So after tonight, we want to judge council's interest in, accepting Edgewood into the Puyallup service area for that southern portion. And based on your interest, we'll work with our consultants to do a deeper dive. So right now we just, we kept it high level. And so we'll look at examining what it would look like supporting Edgewood if we were to bring them into our service area. Tonight, I do want to thank Jeremy Metzler. He's here. He's the Edgewood Public Works Director. He's here to answer any questions. And then Hans Hunger is going to give you a presentation on this. So thanks a lot.
Hans Hunger, city engineer. So on this I wanted to emphasize right now we're at the very early stages of this. We're in just discussion and trying to find out the council's interest in this. The reason why this is coming about right now is because Edgewood is updating their sewer comp plan. They're looking for options on the southern portion of their city, and they've approached City of Puyallup if we'd be interested in serving that portion there, because it would take quite a bit of lift stations to get that sewer area up into the other sewer systems that serve Edgewood. So that's why we're coming to you to find out if there's any interest in this. Wait a minute. And technical difficulties. Sorry about that. Okay, so we have quite a bit of data on this area of the cities for Puyallup City sewer system. We've got, a pretty current update of our sewer plan from 2016. We've just done a very detailed analysis of the North Levy pump station, which is the primary pump station that serves this area before it crosses underneath the Puyallup River and goes on to our treatment plant. And we just have completed an upgrade to that system. So that lift station has capacity for 20+ years now from this point there. We also have just recently, we're in the midst of a wastewater facility plan. That's looking at just the treatment plant to see what capacity we have there, what improvements we need to be planning on for there. If we're going to need to increase the capacity there, and just keeping up with the current regulations for treatment. And then the last thing we have is a recent rate study that was just completed in 2022 that this council had many meetings on and approved. So you can see our current basins here. We've got the whole city mapped out. This is from our sewer comp plan, and it's mapped out into multiple basins there. The two ones north of the river are Puyallup Basin 6 and 33. And so these are basins that we're considering our existing growth. What capacity are we going to need for our own system there? And then as part of this, looking at what are the capacity that Edgewood might need for those for that system that will drain through Puyallup onto the treatment plant. There's a kind of a schematic of our current treatment plant. Just the next council session, you guys will approve a pretty major project on there for another secondary treatment clarifier there, one of those big circle areas there that's going on. So we've got, the improvements at the treatment plant. They are costly to do. This is almost a $9 million project to complete that. So it's definitely something we want to keep an eye on, is what is our current capacity? What do we need to do to keep that capacity? And here's just another view, and it kind of outlines, different components of that treatment plant, which, if you haven't taken a tour of it, I definitely encourage you. It's pretty interesting what we go through for treating the water before we discharge to the Puyallup River. And then as Ken mentioned, here is the boundaries of our sewer service area prior to in part of the 2008 sewer comp plan. And you can see the purple dash line went up into the southern basins of Edgewood. So at that point, we did have, we're planning for service to that area. And then this is looking at the additional potential basins for Edgewood. We're talking about 4 sub basins that are north of Puyallup there for in the future connecting. And when we've looked at this future connecting, we've really looked at what is the timing of those types of connections there? Because a lot of this area right now is already developed at more of subdivision level with existing septic systems there. And the septic systems are relatively new, so you usually get at least a 25-year lifespan on those septic systems, and you probably wouldn't be looking at something needing to be connected to our sewer system until you start seeing failures of that system. So just following up on that, so what would drive Edgewood? I'm sorry.
Just on that last slide before we leave it. I wanted to identify the basins. So it's the 17, 20, 19, and 31 are the 4 basins involved.
Those are the 4 basins being considered. So as part of the Edgewood sewer comp plan, the other basins north of that would be served by others.
And, it's a little hard for me to tell from this map where the ridge line is there. So,
pretty much looking at everything from the base, the valley floor up the hill to getting close to the top of the hill for Edgewood there. So all this, gravity flows down towards us.
So the top of the basin 31, for instance, would be approaching the top of the hill.
Yep.
Got it.
Yep. And so that's one advantage. Why would we even consider this? Well, we've got a lot of gravity flow coming towards Puyallup already there. So it makes it easier rather than having complex lift stations. That being said, though, in the analysis, you would look at some lift stations having to be constructed along the border between Puyallup and Edgewood there in order to lift them up to the current system that's in Puyallup 6. So what would drive really Edgewood needing these connections? Well, as I mentioned, either the septic system starting to fail There are some proposed warehouse developments in Subbasin 20. Those would actually probably be the first areas to want to connect to our system there as they develop. And then, you know, we're not expecting the residential subbasins in 17, 19, or 31 to need to connect within the next 20 years, as they'll be served by their current septic systems there. And so then the question comes up, how would they connect? You know, at what point would you make that connection there? And I think what we've talked about so far with Jeremy is that before we actually made a connection to our sewer system, each of those basins would need a little bit of a sub-plan to see how big does the system need to be to connect there, and then make sure that it's being implemented in a way that it anticipates any downstream improvements that would need to be done when that is fully built out. So the one nice thing that we have here is we have a lot of time to plan this out if we decide to move forward on this. How it's going to be implemented, making sure all the components of any additional cost to the Puyallup ratepayers is factored into and proportionally out for those new ratepayers to pay. And so there you can see from this slide, you know, this is kind of a schematic of what a fully built out system would look like and where the connections would be made. Right now for Puyallup, only Puyallup Subbasin 6 has sewer system in there. Eventually 33, which is also north of the river, would connect in. But even that one, similar to the basins in Edgewood, is probably 20 years out. There's quite a bit of infrastructure for us to get to 33 to connect that in. And so it's mainly septic systems right now. Most of it is unincorporated Pierce County, but it's within our urban growth boundary. That's why it's currently within our service area. But the plan that we have now would require 2 lift stations and quite a bit of pipes to get out to 33. So we're looking at how long would that be till we actually connect that in. And that'll actually be a future discussion. I'll be coming back to you on May 7th to talk about incentives for maybe ways to speed that time frame up with private development partnerships there. So one of the things that we've analyzed and looking at the infrastructure, as I said, most of our infrastructure on the north, we've done a lot of improvements. Originally, a lot of it was put in planning for the Edgewood to be part of it there. So it's some of our newest infrastructure in our sewer system. The Puyallup, the sewer system that's north of the Puyallup River. It's the newest that's been connected there, and it had additional capacity. So in looking at the next 20 years horizon, we're trying to see what are we going to have to do for increasing pipe sizes within that time frame. And really, there's only one project that we identified, and that is actually south of the river. It's after we cross under the river and then go along River Road out to the treatment plant. That'll probably be within the next 10 years, not because of Edgewood being added in, because of our own growth in the North Basin, have to increase that pipe from its current 15 inch diameter to probably something more like a 24-inch diameter there. So that's the one project that we identified that, yep, we know that ahead of time. We've got a plan for it and stuff. But any future connections, as I said, would require some sort of sub-basin planning to know exactly, do further analysis. So we have that time on our hands to be able to do that. And looking at the just another map of the Edgewood additions there, you kind of, this highlights and just really focuses on where is our current system out there right now. What do we have in place? We have our lift station in the green blob there. That's just off North Levee Road. That's just been completed for an upgrade, so it has capacity for the next 20 years. And then I identified both the dashed line that connects across the Puyallup River. That's called a force main. It's where we actually pressure force that sewer to get it across to the river, and then the existing diameter pipe there on River Road that would need to be upgraded. So, you know, the next steps on considering this, if this is something that, you know, you're thinking, okay, this could be good, is, you know, you might have questions about like, well, is this financially good for our ratepayers to add this in? My answer to that question really is, when we have existing capacity for the next 20 years at our treatment plant. We have capacity in the pipes north of the river that would feed from that would Edgewood would feed into. I'd say yes, by setting the rates appropriately and stuff, that we're adding more ratepayers to be able to help fund our current, improvements that we need to make throughout the system without overtaxing the existing system these ratepayers would be going through. I guess I would almost equate it like if you had a house, you had extra rooms. Yes, there's going to be cost if you rent those rooms out because you've got more people in there. But if you're not having to make huge upgrades in your rooms to be able to have those rented out and stuff, you're getting more income for the entire system and stuff. So, poorly done analogy of like trying to just break it down into what are the financial considerations for our system, and is this something that can be good? And then the other thing I'll just reiterate is we have time, if we go down this direction, before any connections are made, to do that planning for that particular basin that's going to come in. How does that impact the system? What are the rates need to be done? Probably our next step would be, if this was something that was interested in, is to do a financial analysis. It would be a follow-up to the rate study to look at what are the improvements, what would be the potential rates that we would charge. And then very likely it would be an upcharge on top of what the rates that we normally pay. The other thing that I will say on this is we're trying to think of a model where Edgewood will own the pipes in their jurisdiction and we'll own the pipes in ours. Eventually, we want to get to the point where we are just charging for the effluent that's coming to our treatment plant and being treated. But with Edgewood owning the pipes and either Edgewood installing them or private development installing them, we're not on the hook as the city of Puyallup to have to extend our sewers further in that area. We're already almost at the boundary of our northern city line in there. So if we're not having to pay for those capital improvements there, and we're not having to maintain those within the city of Edgewood, that's a benefit to our ratepayers. We're still collecting, funds for that. In fact, those funds that are collected as Edgewood residents would pay their sewer utility bills, part of it would go to Edgewood to maintain their portion of their system. And then the part of it for us for both taking the effluent and any upgrades that we need to do. So with that, I think I'm at the point of opening, turning it back to the council for discussion.
Thank you, Hans. With that, however, before we go on to questions, and we're going to go to Councilmember Whitting first, I want you to clarify something. You said upcharges. You mean upcharges that would go to the residents of Edgewood, correct? Not the residents of Puyallup.
No, I'm sorry, I should have clarified. So I'm thinking if a normal resident in the city of Puyallup pays, say, like $100 a month, then we could upcharge 100 plus a little bit more for the privilege of using our system. It doesn't have to be the same as the ratepayers in the city. And the way I justify some of that is not only do we own the pipes that they're connecting into, but we're paying for other things such as like when we improve a roadway above the pipe or something like that, all that is other costs associated with the city of Puyallup.
I understand that, but again, we're talking about the city of Edgewood payers, correct?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
because that you actually, am I correct? Did I hear him say, yeah, you said Puyallup again?
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Edgewood would be.
Yeah, that's just want to clarify. Councilmember Whitting, please.
Yeah, it seems pretty clear that if we look at Edgewood and Puyallup as a single entity, we would not want to put a lot of lift stations in to transport the effluent up to the top of the Edgewood Hill. It makes economic sense to have it flowing down towards this end of the combined city. So that's the kind of situation where having partnerships between cities makes a lot of sense. And I think it's better for the community to help out our good neighbors in Edgewood if we can. On the other hand, I'm here to represent the people of Puyallup, but I think that given the economics of the situation, we could design the the economics, the upcharges, whatever you want to call it, so that our Puyallup ratepayers are made whole and the Edgewood ratepayers are better off, and maybe the Puyallup ratepayers are a little better off too. So that would, I think that kind of partnership just makes a lot of sense, and I would support it, but again, express my need to be able to be confident that the Puyallup ratepayers aren't going to be on the hook for something at some point in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. I support looking into this wholeheartedly. It makes sense. I don't think that staff would have brought it to our attention unless they thought that there was some feasibility, even though it's a policy decision. It makes sense. I think it could not only help offset some of our expenses and help increase our improvements for our infrastructure without any major load on our existing system. Makes sense to me. So I would fully support it. And beyond the fact that there is some precedence for other water companies. We share water with other jurisdictions. So there is some precedent set on this that we do. So it's not inconsistencies to see utilities cross over a little bit on that. So it's nothing new on this, and I would certainly support it. So I'm glad that Edgewood approached us, and I'm glad that it may likely make sense. So I would support further study on this and hopeful implementation.
Thank you. Councilmember Dorr.
Thank you. So Hans, on the financial analysis, who pays for that?
In this case, we would probably look for Edgewood to do the financial analysis. So hiring a company like did our rate study and stuff to go through that and look at that. We shared cost on the analysis for the amending the sewer comp plan to include this, because part of that was looking at our own infrastructure. So they've already, shared that cost of doing that. But when it comes to the financial portion of it, I would think that would be an Edgewood cost.
Okay, so I'm not sure what I think about this, but I do want to echo what Councilmember Whitting said. We just went through our rate study, and you know how I felt about that, and I did not vote for the rate increases. Want to make sure that Puyallup taxpayers, the ratepayers, I should say, are made whole. And like when you talk about we have the extra room to rent, but there's also wear and tear on that room. You've got to replace the carpets, you've got to redo the paint and those kinds of things. So I want to make sure that if we move forward on this, that we are not we're not charging Puyallup for Edgewood. The Puyallup, the current rates that we're paying, the future rates that our taxpayers our ratepayers are made whole. So I'm not opposed to it, but that I just want to be very clear about that expectation. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't believe any other members have comments. I will just say that I think sum up, clearly it has been said that our number one priority are the ratepayers in Puyallup. That's who we represent. And we have built this system, and we have just put into effect a new rate that in fact will anticipate infrastructure improvement. So it must be a mutually beneficial arrangement, and cannot be just beneficial to the city of Edgewood, who, by the way, I really appreciate them as a sister city next to us. And you can pass on best regards to your staff and to your elected officials up there. I think you have a very admirable city. Having said that, my obligation is not to the city of Edgewood. And therefore, I think the expressed interest on this council is that you proceed with mutual benefit, but we're going to be tough on that mutual benefit. And, we would clearly, if we have that kind of capacity and it can enhance and make life better for the people of Puyallup, again, mutually beneficial and life good for the city of Edgewood, then we will proceed. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. With that, we're going to go to, if there's no further comments, we're going to go to citizen comments. City Clerk, could you please provide the instructions for public comments, excuse me.
Yes, sir. Public comment, I'm sorry, this part of the meeting is for general citizen comments. Please reserve any public hearing testimony to that section of the agenda. The mayor will call on those who have provided their names in advance. Then the mayor will call for other citizens who wish to speak. For the record, please state your name and address or city council district in which you reside. Please direct your comments to the council as a whole, not individual council members. All comments are limited to 2 minutes as this is a study session. The clerk will provide verbal notice when only 30 seconds remain. As a reminder, this portion of the meeting is council's opportunity to hear from the community and not a time to engage in debate. Lastly, per state law, this public comment period cannot be used to speak in support of or in opposition to a ballot measure or individual candidacy, and no such comments will be allowed.
Thank you, City Clerk. Appreciate that. Normally, comments at a study session are limited to 2 minutes, but as you can see, we have a complete crowded room here today. And I say that facetiously because that's obviously not the case. So with the, if I'm hearing no objection, I will allow individuals to speak for 3 minutes as you would have in a normal session. But again, that would be an exception if I don't hear any objections.
I would just ask, are you going to do that moving forward at other study sessions? If that's going to be the practice?
This is an exception based on the crowd that is here today. Again, if I hear an objection, if you don't think that that subjectivity is valid, then if you object, then I will stick with 2 minutes.
I struggle with making an exception. If we're going to do it for one, we need to do it for all.
Is that an objection?
Yes.
Okay, then it's 2 minutes it is. First, let's have Paul Romich come forward.
Thank you, Mayor Castma. Paul Romich, District 1. I put down fireworks. I don't really care about fireworks. I have a dog. She's got fluff for brains. She doesn't hear fireworks. My cat does. He doesn't like them. But the main issue I have is when it's the big bada boom, so to speak, right? Legal, illegal. It bothers me when there's a symphony of car alarms going off once someone sets off something. That's when it kind of crosses the line. So like some level, I think an infraction route makes sense to me. I don't want to, see them in handcuffs or anything with fireworks, but like, all right, like there's a level of public nuisance going on here when, you've disturbed cars enough to set off the alarm, right? Chief Engel said that they could be legal, that chances are they're legal these days. We've made sufficient gains in technology where we can pack a lot of gunpowder and make bigger booms. But yeah, just it's bothersome in that regard. And yeah, I hope that city council kind of cracks down on or at least finds that kind of happy balance. I don't think a full-on ban is really necessary, but at least something where we can at least keep
30
it
seconds.
in a positive manner. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. Next is Doc Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Doc Hanson, District 2. I want to first of all thank the council for bringing this to this study session. It's a very important item, and I appreciate all of the information and the comments that were made by the council. Given that we only have 2 minutes, one of the biggest issues I want to bring forward is what Council Member Dorr brought up, which is I don't want to put in anything in here that's not enforceable. Traffic tickets are not enforceable. I can hear a car going down a street and I can say this is happening. The police department hasn't witnessed it. They can't give them a ticket. What I'm talking about is these big displays. And sir, you're going to get more than 18 comments this year because people don't know that they can do anything about it. It's been told to them they can't do anything about it. Federal Way, and I gave you the code, and I talked to the deputy police chief about it very long while I was employed there. They have illegal fireworks. It is very minimal because they did have de-escalating enforcement. They did the first year.
30 seconds.
They found these big ones and they took them. They witnessed it because they heard it. They got the complaints and they went on the site and they don't have them anymore. So non-enforcement is not relevant. You're going to be able to enforce, excuse me, you're going to be able to enforce it if you have it on the books because you're going to get more calls. I'm going to be making 5 of them this year.
Okay, thank you. Would other citizens like to come forward? I believe I was noted that Larry Voland would like to come forward. Please proceed. If anybody else too would like to speak this evening, please come forward. Mr. Voland, sorry, I called you Larry. I feel real bad about that.
All right.
He was my teacher, 7th grade teacher. And I had my deputy mayor say to me, how could he possibly be your 7th grade teacher? The guy looks younger than I do. And I will say, however, this is a true story, that the very first day of class in his room, all of the students came in and everybody was rowdy. They were running all around the place. You'll remember this. And then it got settled down. Everybody said, where's the teacher? And he stood up. He was actually acting as one of the students, and we all thought he was a student, and I'm not making that up. So you want to know this guy, whatever he eats, drinks, whatever, it's the elixir of life. So with that introduction,
I was
proceed.
only 22 years old then.
Okay, please proceed.
I'm Larry Voland, and I'm not a citizen of Puyallup. I'm a citizen of the Summit Waller community, your neighbor directly to the west. I'm also co-founder of the Summit Waller Community Association. We're now 31 years active in the community. We've done a lot for the community, although we are very interested in what's going on in Puyallup because we're next door. And I've been off again, on again, president of the community association and current board member. When we saw this article in the newspaper about the mayor and the litter problem along state routes 167 and 512, well, we got to thinking at our last board meeting that we also border 512. It's our southern boundary, and we're concerned about that too. And not only was this article a good read, but it was highly educational, and it's educational not only for the citizens of Puyallup, but also for county residents as a whole, because I never knew there was a Keep Washington Litter Free campaign by the Department of Ecology. There's nobody I talked to on my board or anybody else that knows about this campaign. There's no signage along state highways to that effect. And we didn't know that there was a $5,000 fine.
30
We
seconds.
realized there's a fine. We didn't know it was $5,000. There's no signage to that effect either along state highways. We were considering working with Pierce County to come up with a Keep Pierce County Litter Free campaign. And it's nice to know that that we now have this information. The other thing I want to just mention a few words about is your discussion on the fireworks.
Mr. Mayor, the
We,
speaker has reached a
I'm
minute.
sure my board would be very pleased that you're working this situation out, since we've worked with the county for years on the current code for Pierce County.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good seeing you here. I
Good seeing
appreciate you.
again. And Renee Gilliam, Councilwoman, my neighbor for 10 years before she moved to Puyallup. Nice to see you again.
Great to see you, Larry. And Barb.
Okay, with that, is there anyone else wishing to come forward in the audience? I will take this liberty for a couple announcements. This Saturday is going to be the farmer's market, first farmer's market from 9 to 2 p.m. The city will have a booth there. City council can be there throughout the day from 9 to 2. We'll set up the booth. It'll probably be near the library. It's an opportunity for the public to come out and see us in person. And I was getting much feedback from the public in Puyallup where they said, we want you to go to where people are, as opposed to us having to come to the council chambers. So this is a great opportunity for us to go to where the people are. And there will be hundreds, if not thousands of people out there this weekend. So it's a great opportunity. The second item is the WSU Master Gardeners Program. Their annual plant sale is April 27th to 28th at the WSU Research Extension Center. We had to go all the way out Pioneer to get there from 9 to 4 p.m. on both of those days. If you haven't been there, it is a wild experience. I have never seen lines so long and all of the people there are so excited about plants. I mean, getting specific tomato plants and all kinds of stuff. It's a sight to be seen. It's an annual event in Puyallup. And finally, the last announcement I'd like to make is that Pretty Up Puyallup, which is Renee Muir's effort, is starting again or is going to have another event this weekend near the Liberty Theater, the Main Street Association, starting at 9 in the morning. And it's kind of germane to what Mr. Volan had to say about litter, because that's Pretty Up Puyallup is where we congregate and get all volunteers together. We go throughout the city and pick up litter. Councilmember Dorr, Councilmember Gilliam, Councilmember, Deputy Mayor, King. I've seen all of you out there picking up litter, and of course I have too. So that's going to be meeting at 9 a.m. and we encourage the public to show up. Last time they had this, I think they had 12, 15, something like that, volunteers. So with that, we're going to adjourn this meeting. Thank you all for being here.